Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. I'm so thrilled today to be joined by the fantastic Keiko Elizabeth, who's currently starring in the Showtime series City on a Hill. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about was in coming into the show in the second season, whether you found yourself looking at earlier episodes in terms of character arcs, a lot of the internal politics, and even just the details to really figure out where your character fits into this and how you wanted to develop her to really fit into this world that's already been constructed and is a living, breathing organism already.
Yeah, I did watch all of season one, which is fantastic. More to get a sense of the world and um, who Jackie Rohr is and what kind of a world in Boston in the 90s that they were really trying to develop. And of course, people that I know were making sort of comparisons between my character and characters from season one. Is your character going to be kind of like blah, blah, blah? And but it was I more watched the episodes to look at the kind of world that they were developing and who the characters were that were already existing in the show.
And
Yeah.
beyond the episodes as well, because obviously that very specific time period and the setting of the location feeds into your character so much and what her worldview would be. So was there research beyond the episodes that was really useful to you to glean a lot of those details?
Yeah, there was actually. Once I sort of had done enough work myself, just sort of developing Karen, then I was able to move into like looking at Whitey Bulger and sort of like what that whole storyline was. I'm originally from the West Coast, so I don't have a lot of, sort of deep intuitive knowledge of Boston and that kind of Boston history. And so that was really fun to like, I think I read Black Mass and like was just really great immersing myself in like the Boston world. So yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that.
And then similarly, what was the journey in really understanding her work and her day to day of her profession working in the U.S. Attorney's Office, so that you would know, even if you're bringing a moment of that into a scene, the entire backstory of, okay, where did she study? What were the things that she was learning? And what does her day to day look like leading up to this moment?
Yeah, because it was a period piece, I actually did a little bit more research than maybe I normally would have done. I looked at there was this really interesting book about women who went to law school in the 60s. I just kind of wanted to get a sense of like, really the kind of just discrimination that was in the water from the time, like for all of my professional life, all of Karen's professional life has been steeped in sort of this water of like women not being wanted in law school and not being accepted in the profession. And then, Asian American women on top of that. And so I did some of that. And then I also, I almost went to law school. And so I know a little bit about the profession, and I read this great book by Preet Bharara called Doing Justice, which is all about sort of the day-to-day of how he ran the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, from like, who his department heads were and what those meetings looked like. And so that really helped me get a sense of like, from the day-to-day running of the office, it just kind of helped me build that out a little bit. So yeah, I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I did more research than I had originally thought, I guess.
And because of those details that you were mentioning, where obviously she's grown up, professionally experiencing a lot of sexism and a lot of discrimination in the workplace, how did you then feed that into her as a character? Because you've built her to be this incredibly rigid and really strong woman, and it really feels like that's a necessity for her in the way that she approaches her profession. So how did you take a lot of that backstory for her and really channel it into her as a character?
Yeah, that's you're describing sort of precisely that. And we talked about this with wardrobe and hair and makeup as well, just sort of the armoring up that women in the 90s did, moving into that professional space at that time. And just really what was required to be this very, even at a minimal level of respected, let alone like, really respected. So yeah, I would say that definitely fed into like this, really this core hardness that Karen has.
And with that armor as well, you really bring it into her stature. And it's things like someone will be talking to her and she's standing with like very rigid body form and like arms crossed, kind of trying to control the situation in that
Yes.
way. Is that work that you tend to do when you're developing the character before you go onto set, or do you find a lot of those physical aspects once you're actually there and playing a character like her?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I kind of like, I knew that that was the direction that I wanted to, the part of me that I wanted to bring into her. But then there's really something about the shoulder pads and like, the hair and everything, especially for something like that, that sort of just brings it all together, and really helps me like find it in the moment, I guess.
And between in all of the scenes that I've seen so far of your episodes, there's a real power play dynamic that's going on between all of these characters. And she's really kind of like trying to balance and trying to maintain the upper hand. And there's a lot of different ways that you manage to do that. Like that scene with you and Kevin Bacon, where you're walking up the steps and he's trying to talk to you and you just keep walking away. And that's a way of maintaining the power. So are you thinking about a lot of the power dynamic and kind of like who has the upper hand every moment as you're developing a lot of those scenes with Kevin and the rest of the cast?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's, there's this undercurrent of the issues around like our differing versions of what we consider to be justice. But within that, there's this hierarchy that's always being navigated at every moment. And I think that, like you said, there's a lot of ways in which that happens. I think even like calling out the racism, like preempting that is sort of a power play. Like, I know you're saying this about me. So yeah, like all of those moves are ways of sort of just needing to be on top in order to get my job done.
And one of the details that we learned very early on about your character as well is that she was born in an internment camp. And I know that that's part of your own family history as well with your father. So how did you kind of like take that personal history and really think about the impact that that has on her as a character, and how you wanted to transcend that through into her?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. There's this real sense of, it's not something, when I first was meeting with the showrunner, Tom, about the part, he was telling me that one of his really good friends was born in the internment camps, and that, that it wasn't something that he talked about all the time, but that it was something that was always present, just sort of in the background of his life. And I really took that, I really related with that. It's not like it's something that I think about all the time, but it just like, it does really provide the foundation of some of the ways that I experience the world and the way that I see things and the way that I engage. And I really wanted to bring that into Karen as well. Just the way that there's this real tension, I think, in the show as a whole, in terms of self-interest and collective interest. And I think that, Jackie is very self-interested. And because of this experience, there's a way in which my character has this desire to be able to see a bigger picture in terms of the collective interest. And that's how I approach justice, as opposed to somebody like Kevin Bacon's character, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And yeah. Were there many opportunities to have conversations with Tom Fontana? And because I know that obviously the way that things are filming these days, there's much less opportunity to have those sorts of in-person conversations and to have as much time for rehearsal, because everybody's distancing as much as possible on set right up until you're filming. So how did that really shape the experience for you?
We started shooting before COVID. So I saw him, at the beginning. And then when we first started shooting in Boston, and then, we moved to New York, and then of course COVID happened, and I really didn't get a chance to see him very much after that, like you said. So I think it was mostly, I think he was looking for somebody who had that understanding of that experience.
Yeah. And one of the things whenever you're on a TV series, there's that really great opportunity that the more you're playing them, the more the creative team are kind of like open to, and you have an opportunity to really bring a lot more input to who this character is, you know, which you had the chance to do on something like How to Get Away with Murder. But again, with the fact that there was more of a separation on set, was that the same type of experience on this show, or how was it a different process in bringing a lot of that input and your personal choices into the character more as the season progressed?
Yeah, you know, I would say probably the latter. Well, maybe a mix. I guess I just wasn't as present maybe in those conversations as I might have been otherwise. But when we went back to shooting in the fall, the whole season had been written. Whereas when we were working in the spring, they were kind of writing and developing storylines as we would go along. And so I think they probably, you know, took what they saw and then developed that, but not as much in tandem, like in the moment as we're shooting as maybe it would have been otherwise. So, you know, COVID was what it was.
It's shooting 2020 and beyond these days.
Yeah.
Well, to that point as well, with the fact that, you know, when you were shooting those first few episodes, the scripts are obviously turning around really quickly. And, you know, throughout your career, you've done a myriad of types of roles in television, including a lot of guest star roles, which very frequently come to you with really short notice. They're casting those in the middle of filming. There's often not very much time to create character development. So when you're getting roles like that, where sometimes maybe you only have 24 hours or a few days to prepare it, how do you really shift your process and make sure that what you're bringing is this really fully fleshed idea of who a person is and who a character is, what their voice is, all those physical aspects, when you have very little time to put it together and do as much of that work that you normally would for a role like this?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because I think that that quick turnaround is really increasingly part of our business. And to your point, I mean, I met with Tom on a Monday and I was flying to Boston on a Thursday. So the turnaround was also really fast. So I think that that practice did serve me in a way. There's obviously, you know, a lot more time, you know, when you know that you're working on something for an extended period of time to continue to develop and deepen. But I think that there is there's just an instinct that you kind of have to go with, and then just continue to deepen and refine. And that was what was so fun actually about having the whole break that we had, is that I feel like I just got to know Karen in this whole different way than I would have if we didn't have COVID. So I was kind of looking at that as like a silver lining a little bit.
And when you're working with all of the different directors on the show, you know, they're obviously coming in and they're adapting and evolving to what the environment is on set, how everybody works and your interpretations of the character, but they're also bringing in their own perspectives and ideas and stylistic approaches as well. So what's your method and way for just having to read very quickly, what's their stylistic approach? How are they working with me and the rest of the cast and really evolving to them as much as they're evolving to you?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. I actually had a conversation with Kevin about this one day on set. And we talked about just like how important it is to just bring everything that you have. Like you have to bring a fully fleshed out person. And then the director kind of tweaks the edges, but it's like you said, like they're coming in and some people like to tweak a lot and some people don't like to tweak at all. And some people, you know, speak in this sort of like more technical language and some people speak in this more imaginative language. And so it's a matter of just like really being able to just collaborate with people and have an exchange of ideas in a way that everybody is feeling like supported and engaged and like they're getting what they want out of the process.
And in working with Kevin Bacon on the show, so much of the environment, but also the way that everybody works together very often comes from the lead on a series like this. So what's kind of the tone and environment that he really sets to create and for everybody to be able to feed off of?
Yeah, 100%. He was really incredible. Just, you know, in the first episode, he also directed that episode. And so there was this way in which I had kind of expected that he would be really frantic and like be in a million different directions. And just the ability to talk to each person as if like what they have to say is the most important thing in that moment. Because every member of the team is really important for making this product everything that it can be. And then later when we were, returning, and there was like all these COVID protocols happening, and like it was just so insane returning to set. He was just this really sort of guiding force and making sure that just in setting an example of like, if something happens, we're going to have to stop. And so he was just really a leader, just really, really great on set. Yeah.
And with your journey in your career into acting, you came from teaching initially. And there was an interesting thing that I've heard you talk about in that part of the connectivity to acting was actually just really seeing the way that stories had the ability to connect with a lot of your students in these very unique ways. And so I wanted to ask you about that and the way that that really influences the types of characters and the types of roles and the stories that you're really seeking to tell as an artist, from witnessing firsthand and just really seeing the impact that it can have in day-to-day life.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I've always wanted to do television. Like a lot of people I know are like, oh, movies, blah, blah, blah. But I really feel like television is so impactful, and especially now it's so good. Like people are inviting you into their homes, into their living rooms for like hours and hours and weeks and sometimes months and sometimes years at a time. And the impact that that really has on culture and on how people think about other people and the issues that are on the table is just like really, really cool to me. And so I've always been a person who's known that I've wanted to do television ever since I became an actor. So I think that's like one piece. And then the other thing is just, we don't always as actors get to choose the stories that we tell, but I have this belief that that we call in certain stories to us based on, I don't know, that there's this like way in which we encounter stories, and all the people come to the table of a story that we're meant to tell. Like that everybody who worked on City on a Hill, there was a way in which everyone was drawn to that story for a very specific reason. And so I just have faith, that the stories that I'm meant to tell are the ones that are coming my way.
Yeah. And you also started out by taking an MFA in acting as well. And so what were the things that you really specifically were hoping to hone within your craft and really wanted to utilize that time in developing as an actor?
Yeah, I think at that time I was just like, my point of view was like, well, if you want to be good at something, you have to go to school. Like that's just kind of like my culture, how I grew up, is that like school is where you go to learn something. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go to school. And when I applied, they were like, well, do you want to teach? And I was like, no, I don't really want to teach. Like I'm kind of done teaching actually. And so it was, knowing that going in allowed me to really have a clear intention with all of my coursework and all of like the experiences that we had, that this was experiential for me and professional for me rather than like preparing me to then go on and teach somewhere, which is what a lot of MFA candidates ultimately do. So
yeah. And it sounds like you've really found a lot of specific kind of like community and mentorship spaces for yourself within the industry. And, you started a group that is mothers within the industry. And that's a really great resources, and being part of Brown Girls Doc Mafia, where you've been working with that community and some of the documentary projects that you're developing. But when you're first stepping into an entirely new industry and space, how did you set about starting to find those communities for yourself and building those support systems?
oh my God, it's so intimidating, there were certainly sometimes the industry gives you the impression that everybody who is in it was somehow born into it, which is like not true. But I had to be really intentional about how I wanted to experience the business and how I wanted to experience my career. I wanted to experience it in community with people. And so like, where do I find those people? I think I first turned to Women in Film, and they have some great mentoring programs through Women in Film, and just really just putting yourself out there and meeting people and finding out what people are thinking and what they're working on and what is challenging for them. And I think that that's really important. That kind of professional community makes the work more fun.
And one of those as well is a theater group that you've been part of. And it sounds really fascinating in terms of the way that you democratically select a lot of the projects and kind of like the group self produces a lot of it as well. So how has the opportunity to be part of all of the behind the scenes process on a lot of those projects there really enhanced your acting and taught you a lot of things from witnessing everything through that other perspective as well?
Yeah, there was a while where, and not that this is completely dead, but there was a while where I was like, well, the multi-hyphenate is kind of the thing to do, like producing your own projects and writing your own stuff. And I just wanted to experience just all aspects of that and then kind of decide what I wanted to do based on not on like what people feel like you should be doing or but just really based on what I wanted to do and what I liked to do. And I felt like, how would I know unless I go out and try it? So I tried all of those. I produced, like I think I directed something there, and it's just a really great space for creative experimentation. And I love that. There's like no greater way to grow than just to try stuff in a safe space.
I also wanted to ask you about the space in your home that you've kind of created as like your creative nook and the space that you go to every day. And it's whether you're working on an audition, whether you're working on scripts for a show like this, and the fact that that is such a necessity for you every single day, whether there's a specific project, and how you really utilize just carving out part of your day every day to focus on creativity in all of these myriad of ways, again, whether it's for a project or just taking that time for yourself.
Yeah, and it actually goes back to something you said before about like the quick turnaround. Like I think that there is, because I'm in touch with my creativity every day. There's something that allows that, like that's always greased, kind of, But yeah, and also as a mother, I feel it's really important to have that space of self, that space for my own imagination and creativity, and to just really literally and sort of energetically too take that space for myself. So I do have a little nook and has a candle and like crystals and stuff like that. So yeah.
And particularly, over the last year and before you were able to go back to filming City on a Hill, how has that really shifted as well? Because being an actor, so much of that is about other people, whether it's a director, a producer, scene partners that you're working with. That creative process very much involves other people a lot of the time. So how did you find different ways to shift and evolve that for yourself to keep that alive in the time where you couldn't be around other people?
Yeah, I'm always working on a story. I'm a part of a great ongoing class community at a studio called The Imagined Life. And so I'm always have my fingers in different stories, that I'm interested in working on, different parts that I'm like, oh, maybe sort of this would be fun in the future. Why not kind of work on this now kind of thing. So that's what I do every day during that time.
And in working on City on a Hill and shooting this first season, what's the thing that's ultimately ended up challenging you the most that you haven't necessarily been pushed into with other previous roles and projects?
Yeah, I think for me, really being able to step into my own power within this hierarchy that exists, which is sort of the federal judiciary, and really needing to find the inner space of power to occupy that position was really a great opportunity. But it's something that I had to step into every day, just really claim that position and that really find the source of that power within myself in order to really make Karen not just this sort of flat, rigid character, but really bring depth to that experience of being a woman in power.
Well, I've loved the episodes that have come out so far, and watching you whip these other characters into shape, especially. And I can't wait to see the rest of the season. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Mara.